Hello and welcome back to a very special episode of the Piano Pedagogy podcast. I'm here at CSU Fullerton with Arianne Lacra.
Hey.
We both graduated from here. And I'm Jacqueline Beckoff. I own a successful music studio in Southern California, as well as Define music teacher. And Arianne Lacra also owns a successful music studio here in Southern California. How are you doing?
Doing well. It's good to be back on campus. You know, it's been a while since I graduated, but I come here every now and then to attend recitals and concerts. So it's been a few weeks, maybe a couple of months. Great to be back. Beautiful day out. We're here in the patio of the Titan Student Union to record this podcast in person.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, it's the story why we're here today is because I'm meeting with my college piano teacher. I'm strongly considering coming back for my master's degree. And I have an audition in April if I decided to go that route, but I'm meeting for my first piano lesson in 3 years, which is, it's going to be wild.
What are you going to do?
I'm playing my recital pieces, not my recital pieces, my audition pieces for her. Yeah, I'm playing several pieces from the Bach E major French suite. I'm playing the Allemande, the Courante, the Sarabande, and the Gigue. And then I'm playing the first movement from Beethoven's first piano sonata, Opus 2, number 1, the Allegro. And then I'm also playing Melody number 3 by Fanny Mendelssohn.
Ooh, awesome. Bach, Beethoven, and Mendelssohn.
Yeah.
Decent program there.
Yeah. I'm super nervous. I'm super nervous. It has been forever since I have had a piano lesson.
Well, you know, you teach them every day.
That's
so.
Yeah, but it's not different. I was telling my students at a workshop about my piano lesson that was coming up, and I said, the way you look at me and the way I know way more things than you do about piano is the same way I look at this piano teacher, my piano teacher, and she knows so much more than me. And the kids were absolutely flabbergasted. They could not believe that there was someone who knew more than I do.
So humble. I know. I don't know how she does it. Our teacher who taught us both in college, I don't know how she did it.
She is a busy lady. She's the head of the piano department here, and she also maintains a private studio as well. And I don't know how she do it, but I guess if you're doing something you love, then you don't work a day in your life. So, but
I have a few thoughts about that quote.
No, I'm not sure I agree with it either. Our topic today is the seasonality of piano lessons.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what that means. I'm sure you've noticed that, the summer is a weird time for piano lessons, right? I'm sure many of you have students that drop out for the summer to go on vacation. They're not doing school, and they kind of check out, and then they come back in August having forgotten everything that you taught them in the last 6 months. Has that ever happened to you?
All the time. It happens all the time, more often than I like to admit. Even if you go in and the parents, student, and you, all three members of the trifecta, have the best of intentions to limit summer learning loss, it does happen.
Yeah, it's really rough. And I think that many people are interested in how to try to mitigate that, right? Because for us, it's also a big hit to our income over the summer, right? And that really stings. Some teachers have some public school teachers have a contract where they get paid throughout the 12 months in the year rather than like the 9 months that they teach. And I know that some people, because it's the same amount of money, but it's spread out over the 12 months, which, I imagine would make things easier for them in a lot of ways because they're not having to deal with that suddenly no income in the summer. Right. But for the students, I'd imagine it's also rough for our piano students. It's rough having that transition when they come back from essentially not practicing because they don't practice if they don't have a piano lesson, right? I think that's pretty fair to say. Most of our students don't really practice if they don't have a piano lesson to look forward to. So do you think that your students come back from the summer and it's like rough for them? Because I know it's rough for us. I sometimes get frustrated. It's like,
Oh yeah, even I have students who will even go on vacation for 2 weeks and come back and feel frustrated that, hey, they can't play this scale the same way that they used to. They can't play their recital piece the way that they used to leading up to maybe a recital, etc. So imagine even longer than 2 weeks. Although I gotta say, I try to encourage the families to continue piano lessons as much as possible throughout the summer, because I usually don't go anywhere, excepting last year. I was on vacation for a couple weeks in the summer, but that is highly rare. And most of the families are like, yeah, we'll go on vacation if we go for a week or two, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month, but then we'll come back and continue our lessons through the summer. So that is one way to look at it. Some studios do a summer break for months, and I am totally opposed to that, because no matter whether you do Zoom or anything, you might as well just keep the consistent lessons going.
yeah, I completely agree with that. I am also incredibly opposed to a summer break, right? I'm very opposed to a summer break because I believe that piano lessons should be a year-round commitment, right? It's not something that they only do for 75% of their year, because that's what it is. 3 months is 25% of the year, right? So an entire quarter. And I mean, just think about if a student takes 10 years of lessons with you, they've missed a combined 2.5 years, right?
Wow.
Because, am I doing that math right? 2.5 years. They've missed 2.5 years of lessons. And think about how that puts them behind students that do stay, right? And it's not even just the missed time, and then you have to relearn a lot of the stuff that they were talking about before they went on break, right? So I think that it's really important to try to set an expectation. We talked in a previous episode about, from the very beginning, about, the very first time we see people, we're setting expectations. We're defining what music lessons is. Does music lessons have singing in it? Okay, that happens from the very first lesson, right? And what happens in that very first summer, I think, is also important, not just for the student, but for the parent, because we don't want them to get the idea that, you can just check in and check out at piano lessons.
Right.
Have you ever had a parent that wants you to save their spot for you, even though they're going to be away for some months?
Yes.
And how have you handled that?
Depending on how things are going in my schedule, sometimes I'll allow it. And sometimes I'll say, hey, check back with me to see what my schedule looks like a few months from now. And I won't guarantee the same time of the week or time of day, but I'll probably have some spot open. So I'll just treat it, scheduling wise, I'll treat it as though they're a brand new sign up.
Right. You said recently that your studio is full now, isn't it?
Pretty much.
So what would you do in that situation?
I still have time slots open. It's just I have taken on as many students as I can realistically handle right now. And so, yeah, in that case, if someone wants to take a break, then that's one fewer student. And then when they come back, it's one more. So it evens out for me. And I try not to obsess too much about a precise number. It's more just like, when is this workload starting to really stress me out each week?
Right. Yeah, no, I understand that. And I think that, it's important. Mental health and self-care as a teacher, I think it's so often overlooked. I have a colleague that doesn't do group lessons, and she has 70 students. She has 70 students. And the majority of them are half-hour and 45-minute lessons. But for me, I don't like the short lessons. I don't like the short lessons. Having 2 half-hour students or 1 hour student, for me, with my mental health, I'll have a much easier time with the 1 hour student, right? Because whenever you have a new student, I feel like I have this struggle where I need to settle into the lesson. I need to then I need to transition out of the lesson and then right back into another lesson. Whereas with an hour, I can settle in for a much longer time. And then as I settle out, it's, I have that time for me with my mental health.
But especially the older the student gets, because time goes by quicker for an older student.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had students that have wanted to take summer, take a month off, right? And my program is set up on a month-to-month basis, right? And there's no method in the contract to allow for a break, right? Because it's rough for me. If someone takes a break, first of all, in my experience, when someone goes away for summer, there's no guarantee they're coming back, right? They'll say, we're going to be back, we're just going away, or we need this month off, and then we'll come back. And in most of those cases, I never hear from them again. Does that happen to you?
Yeah, occasionally I'll get a family who says, hey, we need to take a break, but we hope to resume on X month. 50% of the time they'll return, 50% of the time they'll say, we moved out of California, or I don't know, something like that. There are always circumstances. People move, people reprioritize, people have crazy sports schedules, life happens, siblings are born. That's another big one. We had a baby. We are so stressed. We're cutting the older siblings' extracurriculars. It happens.
Yeah. And I mean, it's rough because, there's no guarantee they're coming back. And then if you save that slot for them and they don't come back, then that's potential. I mean, that's a student. And I mean, I've talked a lot about, the business side, but as teachers, we like to have an impact on people, right? It's not all, obviously, it's not all about the money. And when you have that slot that's sitting there, that's time that you could have already started a new student and you could have gotten them, through the first couple chapters. You could get them on their road. And then you find out when they're supposed to come back 1 month, 2 months, 3 months later, they said, oh, we're not going to come back, right? We're not doing that. So if a student wants to save their slot with me, then they have to keep paying tuition because otherwise there's no guarantee they're coming back. And I would love to fill that slot with a new, bright, exciting student that's ready to learn.
Yeah.
And, I've noticed that kind of thing happens in other times of the year, right? Not just in the summer, right? But going back to the seasonality of piano lessons, the year has these lulls and high points and low points, and winter, December is often a tough time of year for people.
To me, December is tougher than the summer months.
Yeah.
Financially.
Yeah. Well, we have the gift giving, and it's hard if you don't have, your stuff set up to be able to afford that. Because I mean, December, everyone is spending more money, right? Even our students' parents and someone who's looking to start their student in piano lessons, they're not going to do it in December. December is the worst month for me for sign-ups of new students, right?
Yeah.
Because no one wants to do that. The year is winding down. December is not a time for new things. It's a time to look back and rack things up. On the other hand, January, February, those are big months, right? Because people are like, yeah, my kid wants to learn. And for some reason, as human beings, we experience time. January and February feels like a good time to start new things.
Yeah.
Right?
Or I'll get calls from grandmothers in particular all the time who say, oh, over Christmas, I promised my grandson that I would buy him some piano lessons. And I usually get those phone calls maybe in December, but usually in January. Sometimes even February is a late Christmas gift.
Yeah.
Or whatever holiday.
Yeah. It's fascinating how there's this, it's a rhythm almost. There's a rhythm and there's a flow to the year. And as the longer I teach, I know what to expect in certain months.
Yeah. In the beginning, it was all a surprise.
You have no idea.
Summer came around and I was like, freaking out. What am I going to do? Do I have to pick up a shift at Starbucks or something? What do I do? All my students are going on vacation.
Yeah, absolutely. The summer months for me have become this time where, because my studio doesn't have that big dip in the summer, not anymore.
Good.
And one of the reasons why I think that is because I do exciting things in the summer, right? I usually do a studio-wide composition project around a theme. One year I did like the circus, and my students each composed something having to do with a circus, and then we had 8, 9 pieces for that age group that composed something around a circus. But I think they have to have a reason to continue in the summer, right?
Yeah.
And when teachers, I know a teacher, one of my colleagues who does reduced cost lessons much more flexibly. Is that a word? Flexibly.
It is now.
It is a word. Much more flexibly. I have in the summer, right? So you can decide which weeks you want to take a lesson, and they're at a reduced cost. And I think that is, I don't think that's a great idea, right? Because that sets up this expectation that summer is less important for piano lessons, right? And then she's making less money, and it's like things are irregular. You have a week here, you have a week there, you have 2 weeks, and you have another lesson. Like, how do you get anything done, right? It's like when you have a student that comes back after a week, they didn't practice at all. You're like, okay, I guess we're just going to do the exact same things we did last week. And I feel like having that summer, because I used to have that problem in the summer, and people would come back and they didn't practice, obviously, because they're nowhere near a piano. And now I have students that when they take a vacation, they bring a piano with them. They bring like a not a great keyboard, but like they fold up one, or one that doesn't have as many keys, and then they can keep practicing.
Or my favorite, going to a relative's house who also happens to have a piano.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, I'm spending summer at grandma's. Oh, great, we could do Zoom lessons.
Well, Zoom lessons, I think, have been such a great way to do that. I have a student going to China this summer, and we're going to continue lessons, right?
That's amazing.
That's not something that I ever would have been able to do. I have no idea when the lessons will be, because I have no idea what the time difference between here and China is. I'm sure his lessons are going to be on a different day that I teach them.
It's probably like, I don't want to sound like a fool, but with India, I know it's about a 12.5-hour time difference. So with China, it could be around 15, or depending on the region. There's so many different regions, right?
There some point that's 24 hours ahead of us? I don't know. We're piano teachers. We're not time experts. But my point is that this student is going across the world, literally, right? Going across the world. And I'm able to continue the piano lessons with him. And he might not have the best instrument, but still, it's an incredible tool. I feel like, COVID was undeniably a terrible time. It was an awful time. And I would not, obviously, I'm not asking for it to be back, but we learned so much during COVID. Right?
Yeah.
We learned so much during COVID about how to do lessons when you aren't in person, how to teach when you can't write on the student's book for them, when sometimes you have trouble even hearing them if they don't have their Zoom set up correctly.
Mm-hmm. It taught us music teachers a lot.
Yeah.
I had to adapt.
I was here. I was in school. Well, I wasn't here. I was at home. But we started a pedagogy practicum, where it was hands-on teaching. And the first 2 months, January to February, it was normal stuff. And then March hit, and all of a sudden, the entire class, along with my professor, we were learning how to teach piano online, right? Every week she would come back and she's like, here's this thing that I learned. You can make a whiteboard in Google Drive by doing a spreadsheet. I still use that. To this day.
That's
right?
awesome.
And I think that really helps us mitigate a lot of the seasonality. If a student's going to be away, then you can do a Zoom lesson, right? And I think that's so important. Have you ever done that when a student's out of town, done a Zoom lesson?
Absolutely. Yeah, all the time. Even during the school year, people go out of town for this and that. Hey, or I go out of town to my parents' house in Nevada, and there's a piano there, and so I just teach the Zoom lesson from their house when I'm out of town visiting them. Another thing I kind of wanted to talk about with the seasonality of piano lessons really quickly is the fact that you can capitalize on the fact that the kids are not in school at the regularly scheduled times anymore, and maybe organize a summer camp.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of teachers do. And it's also a way to capture new students. Capture them, we're not hunting them. You put them in a net to gain new students, right? You do something, you could have a summer camp for your piano students, Or you can have a summer camp for people who are not your piano students, and they can enroll in a 2-week thing. They come maybe every day in the morning, a time that we're not normally able to teach because kids are in school from, I don't know, from 10 to 12, 9 to 12, right? And they get a group, and and that's a good way to dip your toes into a group piano experience.
Yeah, I think group piano is so educational. It's a new dynamic. There's peer pedagogy involved. Students are motivated in new ways. And a few of the schools that I used to work at, the after school music academies and stuff, had themed camps such as video game themed or rock camp. Rock camp was probably the most popular one at one of the schools I worked at back in the Bay Area. Every single summer, they did a rock camp for their voice students, guitar students, keyboard, drums, bass, you name it. Even with the violinist that I taught, we tried out this fiddle camp idea, and it was kind of a hit.
Yeah, it's a great way to explore separate things, and then they can become full-on programs or part of your normal program, right?
Yeah.
It's a way to try something new. They're only here for a week, right? You see them for a combined 10 hours, Monday through Friday, and then you have a little mini recital or something, right? And it's a different thing. They also don't need a piano in that environment. They're coming to your home. If you have, I mean, you might need to buy some more digital pianos, or rent them if you're not going to be keeping them long term. But they're essentially just coming back to practice, right? So it's a way for someone to make piano lessons more accessible to their child, right? And maybe that is super intimidating as an idea, but the good news is that there are no long-term commitments here. You do it and you're like, I hate this. Congratulations, you only have 4 more days to do it, right? You just have 4 more days. If the first day just went terribly, maybe by the end you're like, okay, this isn't as bad. Maybe I'll try to do some group lessons as a regular thing, you know?
Yeah.
And that I think Arianne, you made a great point that the summer doesn't need to be a bad thing, right? It doesn't need to be a bad thing. It needs to be an exciting thing. For some of my students, the summer is one of the fastest learning times they have because these kids don't have school, and their parents don't want them sitting on TikTok all day, or what, and so they get extra practice.
Yeah, I have noticed that when the difference in learning for some select students who do continue practicing throughout the summer, between summer and fall, actually, when school starts, because they're busier with school, I see a little dip in the quality of the practice. And again, that's not for all the students that I encounter. It's just for those few who are super on top of practicing and taking advantage of the fact that there's no regularly scheduled school during the summer.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing. Some of my really motivated students, we get so much done in those 3 months.
Yeah.
Right? We get so much done in those 3 months. And I feel like in our profession, people have this very negative view of piano lessons in the summer, right?
Mm.
It's always this thing that's like, I need to figure out how to conquer this thing. I need to figure out how to fight what happens in the summer. But I feel like that's not necessarily the right approach, right? Make it so that people want to be there in the summer, that there's new exciting things. Like I said, a summer camp, you can also do, if you've never done them because it's hard to schedule, you can do group workshops with your students in the summer because you have that extra time. And even if it's just like even if it's just 1 week, right? You should try something new in the summer because you have that time, you have that space to be creative and explore that side of piano lessons. I think it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the summer can be very daunting, especially to teachers just starting out or those who are in a transitional period in their careers or not sure exactly how to handle the usual calling out and all of that of the clients. But at the same time, the summer break presents such an interesting opportunity for you to take that problem and turn it into, take adversity, turn it into opportunity, as they say.
Yeah. the seasons, the times of year, they're so interesting because you can do different things at different times of the year. Maybe you love teaching Christmas music. I personally hate teaching Christmas music.
So do I.
I hate it. Nothing worse in my life than teaching Christmas music. And I used to teach Christmas and holiday music for my December recital. We would, and this was a long time ago. I was not great at my job, so I had to start in October to get these kids ready to play for the recital in December. And it's like retail workers, right after Halloween, Christmas music and holiday music.
Oh
right?
my
I got
gosh.
so sick of it that I
Yeah.
now have a ban on Christmas music, and that's not. I mean, it's like if it's because of that recital. And this year, I recently made a big change with my recitals. I've always done May and December, and the rhythm of my life was set by the school, right? May is juries, December is juries. So I might as well also do those recitals. This year, I've switched to April and October, and I'm so excited for it. I'm so excited for April and October because nothing happens at the end of April, and nothing happens Halloween. No one goes out of town to celebrate Halloween, right? And just think, instead of having to deal with Christmas music, I can teach spooky music in October for the recital. When do you do your recitals, or when have you done your recitals in the past?
Typically May and December, but you know what? It's starting to feel like, why are we doing that? It doesn't make any sense.
I know why I did it that way, because that's the way my teachers, when I was a kid, did it. We always had a December recital, and we had one in May, and it just felt like it was right. But that doesn't. It's awful. December is the worst time of year to have a recital. People are scrambling to get gifts, and people are potentially going out of town, and I'm stressed, right? And if I go back to get my master's degree here, I'm gonna have juries in December. Why am I doing a piano recital right as I'm doing my juries?
Exactly.
Why am I combining the stress of those two things?
Now, if you're involved in a church or another place of worship, and the recitals are sort of tied into the traditions of the year, and seasonally that way, I can totally understand that. And I can see why it became a tradition, especially in the US and Western countries in general, for us to play Christmas music around Christmas and things like that. But now that education is increasingly becoming secularized, we could challenge that norm.
Yeah, and I think that, it's an interesting thing to explore. You should never do something in your piano studio just because that's the way it's always been done.
Exactly.
Right? Don't just assume that the way that someone else has defined their studio is the way that you have to define yours, right? You can have more than 2 recitals a year. You can have recitals, I don't know, every other month, right? You can do anything. Literally, it's all up to you. And I think it's sad that people just get stuck in this way of doing things. And before I got pedagogy training at school, the way I taught was the way I was taught, right? I was just taught the way I was taught. And the way I was taught happened a very long time ago. So I was teaching based on half remembered stuff from the ages of 6 to 17, right? From 6 to 17, I was teaching students that way. And that's just another example. You don't need to do things the way that they were done for you.
Right. Because times are changing, and yes, they call it a classical music tradition, but at the same time, when classical music was first becoming classical music, and I'm referring to classical music in the broad term, not just the classical era.
Or little c.
Big C, all of it, Baroque, etc. I'm sure people's ideas were rapidly changing back then of what music was. So why not include more styles than we were necessarily taught? I remember growing up, I was taught a very narrow range of work until I was a teenager and finally got exposed to 20th century piano techniques in my teens. I don't necessarily think that that's how I would go about teaching some of my more advanced students now, or no matter what level they're at. Actually, you can expose students to more recently explored techniques in our music history.
Yeah. And then let me ask you something. I'm curious for the answer here. When was the first time a female classical composer was mentioned to you?
I was very lucky. I was 10. But I know that for others, they may have been in college.
24. 24 was the first
Really?
time I literally, it was in a music history class. Did you take any classes with Dr. Reed?
Actually, yes. Film music.
She was teaching history of classical music. Or maybe it was romantic music. I think it had to be romantic music. I took her for both. And she mentioned Fanny Mendelssohn. And I mean, it just something clicked in my head. Like, I just thought, given the historical oppression that women faced in that era, that there were nobody that wrote female classical music that was a woman. But she mentioned Fanny Mendelssohn, and earlier someone mentioned, what's her name? What's that? Do you remember that female nun during the early music period?
Oh, the one who wrote Barack Obama. Baroque music with all of those ornamentations.
No, this predates Baroque. She was a nun, and she wrote. I know the one you're talking about is Elizabeth Jacqueline and Arianne.
Yeah.
Yes, I've played some of her music too, but it's a very interesting story. But for another time, it's going to bug me. It's going to bug me.
Bug me too.
She wrote chant because that was the only thing that was around back then.
She wrote chant?
She wrote chant, yeah.
Oh,
yeah, anyway, it doesn't really matter. But, if I taught the way I was taught, I would never mention the existence of women in the classical tradition, right? And there were so many that have just been pushed to the sidelines, and they just get a tiny paragraph in these Music History 101 books.
Same with people of color. Now I teach every student Florence Price, because Florence Price wrote music for every level, even beginners.
And I now mention when I teach new students about notation, right? When I first explore the staff, and actually very early when I explore the note types, I now say that this is the kind of music that was written in Europe. And the piano is from Europe, so it has a very deep European history, but this is not the only way to write music. In Asian countries, in African countries, all over the world, they have different, everywhere. They have different, so I mentioned that. I remember taking a world music history class, and it was so overwhelming because there was so much stuff that I had never been exposed to before. And there's just so much.
It's almost criminal.
No, it is. I mean, it's criminal. We have 4 semesters of European music history, and then 1 semester for literally the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And it's not even required at some universities, some colleges to learn about the rest of the world and their history of music.
And the interesting thing is that, especially in the United States, Canada, okay, we're a nation of immigrants. So why shouldn't we learn about our roots? Why can't I learn a little bit more about, say, Indian classical music or Middle Eastern music? We're a nation of immigrants, and we could be schooled on maybe just European and Western music, but the cool thing about being a piano teacher is that you do not have to adhere to that standard of teaching. Professors in institutions totally do. And if they want to introduce a new course, a lot of the times, especially if it's a private institution, you have to jump through all of these hoops, obstacles, and bureaucratic red tape before you can introduce a course, not even just in music, but in the humanities, about anything besides Western schools of thought. So the advantage of being your own employer is that you can say no, you can challenge that status quo, and I love that. It's very freeing.
Yeah, it's so important, right? It's so important because there's so much bureaucratic red tape at the college level, and most of your students will never get to the college level, right? Most people do not go on to become music majors.
College level music study.
Yeah, no, most people don't ever get to that stage, right? Because people can enjoy it from 6 to 18, but then they want to be a scientist, right? Or they want to do something else, and that's perfectly normal. But if we wait for college to expose them to these different types of music, then we're failing them because many of them will never get there. And even if they do get there, the university might fail them at that regard. So we have a responsibility to teach, music from marginalized groups, music from women and people of color, and just from around the world. And there was such a racist attitude in the 1900s about what American music was becoming, right? Very racist. And, they were saying, well, the music of the Native Americans, that's not American music. Or the music of Black Americans, former slaves that evolved into jazz and ragtime, and that's obviously not American music. We, the European immigrants, we obviously have the right to decide what American music is. And
pretty ironic.
So many students never get really exposed to jazz music or blues or ragtime. And I think it's criminal not to do that. Well, maybe that's a little bit too far.
Is it? Who knows?
But
who's to say?
I think we've gone on this tangent long enough. I feel like that could be an entire another podcast episode.
But it's related to the seasonality of piano because you could decide to do a workshop about one of these topics that is not as often explored in Western music study.
Yeah. And another thing you can do is a composer of the month activity. There's this, I don't know her name, but I will link it in the description of this episode. There's this woman on a website called Teachers, something like that, where teachers post their resources and then you can buy them. And she has like 50 or more composer of the month bundles for different composers, including female classical composers and composers of color.
That's cool.
That's a way to introduce students to something outside of, because method books are awful at this, right? Method books are awful at this. The Favorite Piano Adventures has these stories at the earlier levels where you fill in the note names and they form a story, right?
Yeah.
They have one about Mozart and his 5 names. They have Beethoven. They have all of these things, and none of their musical examples. It's another example of how things, are just biased because none of their musical examples in their theory book have music written by a woman or by a person of color. And the books are letting people down at this, But to be fair, in Piano Adventures last year and the year before, they recently did a big diversity improvement to their books, and certain pieces were removed for being offensive.
Camptown Races.
Oh my gosh, I am so happy that Camptown Races is gone.
Yeah,
and
they changed a couple piece names as well.
Different art.
Instead of Russian Sailor Dance in Favorite Book 1, now it's
the Ukrainian something.
They rebranded it as a Ukrainian folk song, which I wonder if that's the case. It's hard to say, but now it's called Lead On Black Horse. Anyway, side note.
But yeah, that's great. And I remember even just the very simple level, their old theory book, level 1, primer level, had an activity where there was hands and there was arrow pointing to the right, to the finger, and you needed to write in what hand it was, left and right hand, and you needed to write in which finger. And in the old book, they're all white.
Oh, the skin color of the hands.
The skin color of the hands,
yeah. I see, I didn't even know
the skin color was all white. And in
we got the new edition.
The new edition, it has all different colors. Shades. And some of their pictures for their things that were previously all white people now have a mix.
Representation matters.
The snake dance is now pyramids at night. Things like that. They really do matter. And as a piano teacher, we have a responsibility to do that. But again, we're getting off topic. Seasonality of piano lessons. And we've talked about December. We've talked
March.
March. March. What about March?
I have okay. Our mutual friend Stephanie. Shout out to Stephanie if you're listening to this. Always does March Madness, and again, this tied into what we are talking about a little bit earlier. March Madness is this activity that I think did she come up with it? I don't know. I'll have to ask her.
I've not heard this, so I'm interested to hear.
What it is basically she sends out, I think, music samples. I hope I'm not getting this wrong, to all of her students in the studio over her lesson app, and then they get to vote bracket style, just like in basketball, how the basketball competitions go in March. They vote for their favorites and eliminate the compositions that they don't quite like until the entire studio settles on an agreement about what are their top favorite pieces.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really fun, and it gets the students excited every single March, which is like, March, what is March? But in basketball, March is a big deal, right? It's a big time of year. So she kind of, such a creative idea.
It is.
To get the excitement that you derive from basketball season and bring it into your piano lessons. And a couple of years ago, I think all of the composers in March Madness were women composers. So it was a lot of fun to pick and choose and look at that survey and see what they came up with.
That's awesome.
It also exposes you to different composers that you might not have heard of.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing you can do with seasonality piano lessons is when the Olympics are happening. The Olympics they're happening this year, right? The Olympics in Paris.
Oh, yeah.
You can do a piano Olympics. You can have a bunch of different, you can have, first of all, separate your students into different skill level appropriate groups. And then you can have a scale challenge, a theory challenge, a memory challenge. You can have all these different things. And then you can crown someone silver, gold, and bronze,
Get some medals in there.
Yeah, that would be really cool. So I think that, I fell into the same trap. We were talking about how the seasonality of piano lessons, some teachers have to fight the summer. And I think that we were I think I kind of slipped into that during this episode, where I was like, how do we overcome the challenges of summer? But, I think that the seasons can be a fantastic time. Holidays can be a fantastic time to do events. And kids know about holidays, right? Kids know about these things. And that is an opportunity to explore different kinds of music based on, you could have activities based on composer's date of birth or date of death, right? Probably date of birth. Not death, but you can have activities around a certain composer when it's around their birthday in that month. There's so much that you can do, and I think that using the seasons not as a thing to be struggled against or to be fought against, but instead as something to draw inspiration from. That's really cool. You could go on a field trip in the summer. You could go to a piano store. You could go to like a concert, like classical concert. Opera is probably a little dry for our students, so maybe not opera. But you can do exciting things because you have those days in the summer where students don't have any school, and they would love to do that. So festivals, just, all of this stuff, it's such a great opportunity, right? I think it's just a really great opportunity. October, spooky month, composition challenges, activities, projects based off of different times of the year. I think that all of us can do better, right? Mm-hmm. And whenever we can tie something musical into a child's real life lived experiences, when they can relate to they know what a circus is like, right? There aren't a lot of circuses around anymore, but they're probably familiar with the concept, right? And they certainly know that Halloween is a spooky time. So tying in activities and workshops and projects into things that the kids are intimately familiar with, I think it's a wonderful I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, this podcast has gradually gone from cynical to a little bit more optimistic, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think, listen, being the longer in the business, I worry that I'm getting more and more cynical.
Mm.
I'm getting more and more cynical, right? Because I mean, now I've been teaching enough that I can just tell when a student is lying to my face, right?
Oh my gosh.
It is
Don't
so
even get me
frustrating. It
started.
is so frustrating. Yeah, did you practice your memory? Yeah, I did it all week. You can't play this piece though.
Where do
Well,
I
I
put my
just
hands
didn't do
again?
it today. Well, if you had practiced it the other 6 days, you shouldn't have needed to also practice it today. This was a piece that you already memorized and you're just keeping it memorized. Anyway, that's off on another tangent. But I feel like I'm getting more and more cynical. And I think that I need to try to keep that in check better because the majority of our students and the majority of their parents are on our side or the side of their kid, and we're on the kid's side, right? We want what's best for the kid, and hopefully parents also want what's best for the kid. There can just be disagreements about what exactly that best thing is, but I think I need to do better to keep my cynicism in check.
Well, to keep from getting jaded, I think the best teachers, Marvin Blickenstaff talks about this. The best teachers switch it up all the time. They're constantly learning with their students, and that doesn't mean that students are necessarily doing all of the teaching. No, what I mean by that is the best teachers are constantly reevaluating their own methods of instruction, keeping up with the times, reading all the latest journal articles, magazines, pedagogy literature that's constantly being created by the amazing piano teachers that are out there, and music journalism, things like that. And if you do that, I don't think there's going to be a dull moment. You could get jaded because we all have these clients who fall into these patterns or students who fall into these patterns every once in a while, and it's just par for the course. But I don't know. You can keep things interesting by incorporating stuff like what we've been talking about and even more.
Yeah, you should never be teaching the same exact way you did a year earlier.
Exactly.
If I am teaching the same way that I taught in March of 2023, then I have got a problem.
Oh my goodness.
Right? Doctors and even public school teachers and professors, there are requirements to continue your education, right?
Mm-hmm.
When a doctor graduates from med school and becomes an intern, and then I don't know. I've just watched Grey's Anatomy. I don't know how it works. But when they graduate, they've already what they taught is already outdated, right? So they're required constantly to learn more. Teachers, professors at university are often required to publish, right? Which necessitates that they are examining their beliefs and constructing that in a way that they can share that with the world. And school teachers, their professional development is required, but we're not regulated, right? There's no regulatory body, and I'm not suggesting that one be created, but I think that we need to regulate ourselves. And having stuff that changes based on the season. I'm already too late for March Madness. But I'm going to do that next year, right? I'm going to do that next year. And having composition projects and just summer camps, right? I think that now is the perfect time to start planning a summer camp if you're going to do one, right? It's March right now, probably the end of March by the time you watch this.
Got to go in with a plan.
You got to go in with a plan. So that gives you April, May. You can do it in June or July, and just try it. What's the worst that happens?
Mm-hmm.
What is the worst thing that could happen, right? It's a way to get into the group teaching environment without having to experiment on your own students, right? You can experiment on students that don't have a long-term commitment with you. Not experiment on them, but experiment with them about exploring something new. And if it doesn't go the greatest, you learn something certainly, and you may never see those people again.
Yeah, if you can market a certain way during summer, you might find a market of individuals who are only interested in learning music over the summertime. Really interesting idea. Maybe they have sports throughout the school year or obligations throughout the school year that don't exist because there's more time in the summer, or even if they do exist, they can still use their regular school hours to then do music or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with exploring, trying to find different types of students, right?
Mhm.
We all have our ideal student, someone that practices 6 hours a day and is the exact right learning style that we can just tell them something and they'll instantly remember it. And they sit still. And, yeah, I'm sure everyone has their ideal student. And the fact is, we're not going to get all ideal students, right? Everyone is different. And I think that branching out over the summer, especially if you are a person that loses a lot of students during the summer, right? You should absolutely try some things to make it exciting for them to stick around during the summer. But you can also use that time, if they do drop, to do other things, right? Other things as a summer camp for students outside of your studio, or offer more opportunities to the students that are in your studio.
It's also a great opportunity for teachers, going back to the professional development thing. It's a good time to sign up for your conferences that you want to attend in the fall. The NCKP conferences, Music Teacher Association,
TNA,
around the
CAPMO,
across the country. So take advantage of the season to plan for the season
that's coming up. Yeah. So let's see. Let's come up with every part of the year that can be linked to something, starting in January, right? January, suppose you have the new year, right? Because December is the very last so January is New Year. If you're trying to explore something new as a new addition to your studio, something new you want to incorporate, then January is a great time to do it. People are used to things changing in January, right? Because they have to write the new date. It just kind of works their way into people's head.
It's also a good time to teach Auld Lang Syne.
Yeah, that's true too.
If you don't want to teach Christmas music in December, you could teach New Year's music a little bit proactively.
Are there any other New Year's songs other than Auld Lang Syne?
Maybe in the pop world.
Maybe.
Or maybe in different cultures.
All right, so that's January. February, obviously it's Valentine's Day.
Love songs.
Love songs, right? March, well, we've given March Madness an idea here. April, it could be Easter. It could be something having to do April showers, bring May flowers. That's something that you could work in. You could do a project about songs that sound rainy and then songs that sound colorful.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
So that's January, February, March, April, May. What happens in May? Is May Mother's Day? I don't think that's one we could do. So May.
It could be a lot of students are such sweethearts and they always go, I have a few students in particular. It's a couple of individuals who always say, for Mother's Day, I want to learn my mom's favorite classical piece.
That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. May is Mother's Day. June is Father's Day. Just be careful because not everybody will have a great relationship with their mother or their father.
Yeah, it shouldn't be required.
It definitely shouldn't be required, and you should probably reach out to the parental contact that you have for that.
Or chat with your student if you know what their relationship is with the parent.
But there could be a parent that's no longer in the picture, and you don't want to propose a project if that parent is no longer in the picture. It could be a mother or a father.
Yeah.
Or they could be adopted and have really weird feelings. So you should definitely check in before doing Mother's or Father's Day.
Mm-hmm.
July. Well, in the United States, we have the 4th of July.
Yep.
Yep. That's a thing. July, August. Back to school.
Oh, yeah.
Back to school is in August.
Wheels on the bus.
September.
Just kidding.
Well, September is also kind of back to school, huh?
Yeah.
October is spooky music. That's easy.
Yep.
Definitely easy there. Not everyone celebrates Halloween, though, but I think everyone kind of gets the spooky vibes from the season.
Yeah.
November is Thanksgiving. I know one Thanksgiving song because when I was a church organist, they had me play it every Thanksgiving, and I hate it now, and it's Simple Gifts. Ba 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 ba. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. awful. But you do have Thanksgiving,
I thought
right?
that was a Quaker song.
I don't know. They had it. It's in the Lutheran hymnal, and I had to play it.
Interesting. Going back to October for a second. Yes, it's spooky season. However, I just want to add that sometimes when students dress up as certain characters from TV shows, movies, video games, whatever, you could, let's say that someone wants to be Luigi. Well, you could do a sort of Mario Brothers theme.
Oh, tie it into their costume.
Tie it into their costume. If they want to be Cinderella, or that's kind of outdated. If they
Sleeping
want
Beauty.
to be someone from Frozen, you could do a Frozen song. Yada yada yada.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You could do a recital in October. I'm planning to do a recital in October, and I was thinking spooky music, but I think it would be also very fun for a student to play a piece related to their costume.
What if you even had them in the
recital? No,
in the
absolutely.
costume in the
In the
recital
recital.
on the piano, if possible?
Recitals don't need to be this super serious thing. We talked about performance in a previous podcast. They don't all need to be super serious. That can be a great way to introduce a new student to a recital in a much sillier way.
Yeah.
Right?
It's whimsical.
It's
Why
whimsical,
not?
yeah.
It would be a core memory for any student.
Yeah,
Can you imagine?
I think so. I know.
If you dress up as a dinosaur
We
and
need to do
sit down on
Jurassic
the
Park.
piano and play Jurassic Park. Actually, I might try that this year.
I think that would be fun. And it doesn't need to be a recital. If you don't want to do a recital in October, you could do a group workshop where that happens. Then it doesn't. You don't need to have the memorization. Well, you also don't need to memorize music for a recital. But that would be awesome. So we were in November and then
Right.
December, holiday music.
Sure.
Sure.
Winter.
You could
stuff.
also do stuff like offer personalized Christmas ornaments. If
Yeah.
people celebrate, you can have parents pay a couple bucks and get really a different Christmas ornament every year. And then even after
Make
that
some
student
cookies.
stops taking piano lessons, because they always eventually stop, they can see those ornaments on their tree every year, and they can be reminded of the fun times that they had.
Yeah. Well, maybe some photographs, if you want to give some recital photos in an envelope to each family. That's an idea that I've seen used before.
Oh, something else that I do in December for the new year is I personally hate, I think I may have talked about this before. I hate New Year's resolutions. Have I talked about this?
Oh, I don't think so.
I hate New Year's resolutions.
Interesting.
New Year's resolutions are often something like, I'm going to go to the gym every day. And then you miss a day and you're like, okay, I'll try again next year. Right?
Well, all right.
Yeah, well, it's just one day. I'm not going to do it.
Days later,
Well-
same thing happens. And then before you know it,
New Year's resolutions are very, very specific most of the time. And there is a binary success or fail on a daily basis if you've succeeded or not. Whereas what I do in my personal life, as well as in my studio, is I select a theme for the upcoming year. In my personal life, this year is my year of yoga. I really want to get into yoga because I'm getting old and I'm getting achy. And I need to stay flexible. So I've been doing a lot of yoga. Every day I have a decision. Do I do something related to yoga, or do I choose not to do that thing related to yoga?
Huh.
My students pick a musical theme for the upcoming year for their practice. Some students choose articulation. Some students choose dynamics. Some students just choose something like practice. And practice is filled with literally hundreds of tiny decisions that most of the time we make unconsciously. Where do I start from? How fast do I go? What am I trying to do? Am I going to use the metronome? Am I going to count? These hundreds of tiny decisions. And my students, with their theme, I encourage them every year to pick something that they feel like they need improvement on. And then every time they practice, they have decisions to make. And the goal is for them to make decisions that better that theme rather than detract from that theme. So something like articulations. Am I going to sit down and practice? Am I going to think about my articulations? Or am I not going to think about my articulations? I have them make a poster on a sheet of paper, hang it up by their piano. So they're constantly reminded about this thing that they decided in December was important enough for them to dedicate a year of practice to bettering that thing.
Interesting.
And at every one of my group workshops, I do this for the adults, not the little kids. I don't usually do that for the little kids, but for the older kids, I also do this because the little kids are moving so fast, and they honestly, I feel like would be very difficult for like a 7-year-old to decide what am I going to do for an entire year. But for teenagers and for adults, at the workshops, we check in. I go around the circle. I ask them to remind everybody of what their theme is, and I ask them if in this previous month they've made good decisions about that thing. I have a student who is very into composition, but has a hard time motivating themselves to composition. So 2023 was their year of composing. And they wrote a lot of music last year.
Wow.
And in December, I have the students record a video for the next year. And then when we get back in December, they watch back their video where they're explaining to themselves what their theme is and why they chose it. And then I ask them, do you think you improved? Did you better yourself in regards to articulations or dynamics or counting or rhythm or whatever they chose? And it gives a direction for the year. And I mean, we're already a quarter of the way through this year. We're already a quarter of the way through this year. And I asked my students, how has it been? You're 25% of the way through 2024. Have you been focusing on your practice theme? And most of the time, it's yes. And if you force the students to be self-aware and evaluate themselves, which is always a good thing, and then set a goal and then work towards this very long-term goal. And that's something you can do in December.
Interesting. Well, way to take something that you didn't kind of like the idea of at first and turn it into an opportunity.
Yeah.
And you don't have to call it a New Year's resolution.
No,
anyway.
I don't call it a New Year's resolution. I call it a practice theme or the yearly theme, something like that. So there's lots of decisions, and you want to make decisions that better that.
Yeah.
Now, we need to start wrapping up. So big takeaways from the seasonality of piano lessons. I know we meandered there in the middle, but we brought it back.
Yeah, I mean, my big takeaway is, hey, don't let the changing of the seasons get you down as a piano teacher. You just have to know where to look for the right opportunities. Got to have a little creativity, and just use your business brain a little bit. Come up with some ideas that'll keep things fresh and interesting for everyone, especially yourself.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. Using your business brain, businesses all over the world, they have promotions and things related to the season. There's a chain restaurant in California called BJ's. Have you ever been to BJ's?
Oh, yeah.
They have this thing called a pizookie, and it's a baked cookie with ice cream on top of it, and it's delicious. And in October, they put out a spooky pizookie.
Spooky pizookie.
Spooky pizookie. It sounds really good. It had orange ice cream, but it was actually vanilla ice cream. And then it was very spooky and it was interesting. So you should try to, not promotions. I mean, it could be promotions, but something related to the seasons, because kids understand the seasons. Their life is ruled by the seasons.
As are ours.
As are ours. Yeah. Don't feel like you have to do recitals at a certain time of the year.
Big takeaway.
Yeah. That way. Don't feel like you have to do things the way that they were done for you. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap up now. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.